Auburn signed a linebacker, and he's pretty good.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're dapping it up this Friday with the Darrell Dapprich, Montgomery radio legend. And we'll talk from several different angles about the big news happening yesterday. Fa'Najae Gotay, the former Maryland linebacker, out of nowhere, signs with the Auburn Tigers. We'll get Locked On Terps host Tre Moore's his thoughts on it. We'll talk about how it impacts the roster, both current and future. But as far as his play on the field, Darrell, this guy can play. He's got instincts. He held his own in the Big Ten, which is the closest thing to the SEC that you can get. And to me, the worst case scenario is he's a really solid depth piece, but I think this guy's good enough to play.
Surprising on a couple fronts. A, surprising that this commitment and signee just came out of nowhere. Obviously, didn't hear any smoke on this. I'm surprised that he stayed in the portal as long as he did and no one else snatched him up. Tells me that there's some specific things we'll get into later that I think are targeted that he wanted is why he came here, because I feel like he could have went other places and got more of a, opportunity to start. So I'm very surprised, pleasantly surprised by this. And again, that he stayed in the portal as long as he did. There's a lot of schools, even in the SEC, that would have loved to snatch up Gotay. All-name team, Fa'Najae Gotay, great name.
Incredible.
I think that I've done a little, when I found out about this morning, I've watched some tape. I watched what Cole Pinkston broke down. I went to the original Locked On Terps podcast when he did jump in the portal, and I've looked at some film. I think there's some things. Number one, football IQ is off the charts, and I'm hearing that a lot with how he reads the line of scrimmage and that kind of thing. So that's what you're getting in a player. A thumper, he'll hit you. There's no doubt, but he's extremely smart, extremely high football IQ. And oh, by the way, his best game of the year last year was against Auburn in the bowl game. So that's kind of funny. It's the Bruce Pearl method, right? Your player does well against you and you snatch him up. So that is not to be undervalued or understated that Freeze got to see him with his own eyeballs.
Yeah, this guy's been playing college football so long that he has a relationship with Durkin from back when he was at Maryland.
He has a relationship with John Heisman. What are you talking about?
No kidding. No kidding. He graduated high school in 2018. His first year of college football at Maryland was in 2018. And between, getting that red shirt and the COVID year, this is his last year. He'll run out of eligibility after the season, which is what made the initial news somewhat shocking to me. I mean, I wasn't familiar with Fa'Najae Gotay when I saw Auburn Twitter post that they had signed a linebacker. I wasn't familiar with him. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is a young guy to kind of help backfill the recruiting class, and maybe he'll get a little bit of depth work this season, and then he could be a guy next year. But no, this is a guy who has 1 year left of eligibility. Similar situation to Dori Mausi. But to me, it just says, okay, DJ Durkin likes this guy. Hugh Freeze likes this guy. Clearly, they felt the need to add another linebacker, but we'll talk about the roster implications of this. But, I mean, you got to think from a playing time standpoint, this has to impact Dori Mausi.
Yeah, I can't imagine him not getting in the too deep. I mean, I'm sorry, but you don't bring in a seventh-year player to just play special teams.
Seventh-year player. That's
you know what
insane.
I'm saying? I mean, he's expecting to play and make an impact right away because of his experience and this is the kind of kid that can catch up quickly by not being here in the spring. We've heard some things, some scuttlebutt about his football mind is one that DJ Durkin really, really likes. It could see him down the road, maybe in coaching. If this is a kid that Durkin recruited, then that's another draw that Gotay, obviously feels like he wants to come play for Durkin. Imagine that, which we love to hear. I just think that you don't get a guy that, again, when you watch film, and I'm not a guy that's, a savant with that kind of thing. I can see things, and when it's obvious, and he jumps off the screen, but when I hear analysis of people that I do trust talk about how smart he was to pick this particular gap, or to slide this particular way, or recognize this guard coming at you in the box, those kind of terms, or the back coming out of the backfield and he drifts back and picks him up. That kind of stuff excites me. You don't keep that on the sidelines. I mean, I'm not saying this guy's going to get, the Bednarik Award, but I don't see how you don't let him play some significant number of snaps. I don't think he's just an insurance policy, Zach. I think that he is brought in to play some snaps with linebacker depth and to keep everybody fresh. And yes, that could impact Dorian Mausi. Again, I wait to see on that, because Mausi, another smart guy, was here in the spring. How much of there a gap that has to be, closed?
Yeah, we don't have a ton of experiences or proof. I can't think of the word, but of guys, specifically linebackers, who have come in after spring and have done well. Like Larry Nixon was a guy who came in after spring last year, and I think most people would agree that he underachieved with kind of what we were expecting. I think this guy has a better resume and a better body of work at a higher level of competition.
There you go. Larry Nixon was coming from a group of 5. This guy played Big Ten football. I think that matters.
Yeah, it's a big difference. And he's familiar with Durkin, which is a huge part of this as well. And he's just been playing college football for so long. And in a similar scheme, it's just, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer. And I think he is going to play. So once again, like, worst case scenario, depth piece, but I think this guy's going to play. I think he's going to play early and often, Darrell.
What it does is it gives you 2 viable options at both inside linebacker positions that are veteran guys. I love Woodyard. I love Riddick. There's guys like that have been really, we've heard a lot about Riddick being a fast riser. We've heard good things about Woodyard coming out of the spring. But what you get is Asante, Mausi, Keys, and Gotay, all dudes that have played a lot of football. Ironically, if I think about all four transfers, none of them are homegrown through the recruiting class. 2 who have played for Durkin before in his defense with Keys and Gotay. I don't know. Something about that just makes me feel kind of warm and fuzzy. I don't know. I like that the whole continuity of that, and having 2 deep and having experience and veteran leadership at your 2 deep. So if there was, God forbid, an injury or something happened and someone was having a bad game, again, Auburn plays his first 5 games at home, and you know how it is with attrition at linebacker, Zach. This could be big.
I think so. So all in all, huge get. How does it impact the roster? We'll discuss in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Darrell, you love eBay Motors. You've used them firsthand. You needed a part for a hard-to-find vehicle. So you go to eBay Motors, you typed in the make and model, and then boom, the selection was there.
Anytime you are looking for a part for a 1984 Ford flatbed truck, I mean, there's listeners right now, they're like, 1984, wow, that was when, the people weren't alive. But it's hard to find. You can't go to a dealership or go to a mechanic and say, hey, I want this part. I mean, it's hard. And
or you're going to go and they're just going to order it. It's like, well, I can order it. And
it's going to be marked up significantly when they do that too. eBay Motors does not do that. And they keep that in line. And it's a catalog for us now that we use really consistently on a lot of our fleet.
Yep. So with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. Well, the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Darrell, when you look at the depth chart, and we kind of touched on this already to some extent, but in no particular order. I'll give a particular order. Eugene Asante, Austin Keys, Dory Mayusi, Fa'Najae Gotay, Robert Woodyard, which is interesting, and then your freshmen, DeMarcus Riddick and DJ Barber. I think the addition of Gotay makes the path to playing time tougher for Riddick and Barber. And long term, I don't know if that's ideal, but as far as performance in 2024, it makes the room better.
Yeah, and does it now give Auburn the opportunity to redshirt one of those young guys or both? There, and then have them next year when you lose a lot of experience at linebacker when Gotay and Asante, which rhymes. Ooh, if they're in at the same time, that sounds pretty sweet, doesn't it? I just thought about
Gotay and Asante.
Yeah, I like
Andy
that.
Burcham's going to be all over that.
He will. Keys probably has another year, right? I don't know about Mausi. You may lose 3 of your 4 inside linebackers on your 2 deep next year. So if you could perhaps redshirt Riddick and Barber and keep them from burning eligibility, that would be huge. And then obviously focus on that in your recruiting class upcoming and in 2026.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny. I mean, this addition, it adds to the dynamic of this roster even more, where it's a bunch of old guys and a bunch of young guys. And that's why I was so surprised when I saw his name. It's like, oh, this is a junior that's got 2 years left. And obviously that's not the case. So it's just, to me, I'm surprised Gotay chose Auburn. It makes you think, okay, he must really like Durkin and must want to play in the SEC, or, you talk so much about his football acumen, maybe he wants to do coaching at the next level and likes Durkin or something, who knows? But to me, it's just a win-win situation for Auburn. Like, there's no downside here. Like, the absolute worst case scenario is he's a great depth piece that's played like well over 1,000 snaps in his career. I mean, who gets that? That's incredible.
He's appeared in 42 games over his career. When you talk about how does this impact the roster, I have to go back to how does it impact him when he looks at how he'll impact the roster. So what was he looking at that made him say, okay, I think Auburn's inside linebacker core is pretty solid. They've got a pretty good 2 deep right now. There's an argument to be made that Riddick had passed some people, so now Gotay's got to beat out Riddick to even get into that 2 deep. I would imagine he would, because of, like we talked about, all the attributes. But what is he looking at? That's the surprising thing. You normally hear guys that want to say they want to jump and go, okay, yeah, I want to play in the SEC, but is there another school in the SEC that doesn't have 3 or 4 inside? That's why I love the fact that it's kind of like he really, really had his eyes and his heart set on Auburn. And I think that has to be the DJ Durkin thing.
Sure.
Here's the thing I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of variables I don't know. Has the dude even taken a visit? Had he ever been on campus before?
I didn't see it reported anywhere if that was the case.
So think about that, Zach. He commits and signs to Auburn basically sight unseen.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty strong. I mean, I don't know if he's been on campus, but to do that without ever even walking into Jordan-Hare and getting all the visit treatment, that's pretty impressive.
So the oldest guy in the room after those 4 guys, the core 4, is Robert Woodyard as a redshirt sophomore. A guy who we mentioned could be a candidate to enter the portal after spring. Thankfully, he wasn't. What I saw of him this spring, he looked really good. I don't think he's going to get as much playing time this year now because of this. Could that be anything that hinders him wanting to stay at Auburn? Or since it's a 1-year rental, it's not going to matter anyway because it was more about next year for Woodyard regardless?
It's a good thing. I think it will hinder if he felt like he was going to get in the 2 deep and although not be a starter, still get a lot more snaps.
Yeah.
If those snaps go away, you're going to have to sell him on the fact of just be patient and you can start next year if you do what you're supposed to do. We lose 3 of the 4, maybe all 4. Just be patient and you'll have your shot. It's hard, though. It's hard in this day and age of NIL and the portal to convince a kid to stay that we kind of felt like had 1 foot out the door already. Maybe thought like he had crept into the top 2 now or the 2 deep, and that may go away. I don't know. There has to be some very, very real conversation, honest conversations with him that promises him, stay and next year could look a lot different.
Yeah. I think Keys is done after this year.
Well, then Yeah.
He's played in 4 seasons, but one of them was 2020. And so his 4th year would be this year, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So ready for like the folks that played in 2020 to be done because it's just so hard to keep track of it.
Well, and in that case, you would have a combination of Woodyard, Barber, Riddick, whoever else. And obviously, you're going to go to the portal and get some experience.
Because he played in 4 games. He played in a bunch of games in all of these seasons. So he couldn't have been redshirted any of those 3 non-2020 years. So I'm pretty sure he's done after this year. Correct me in the comments if y'all think contrary to that. I'm curious. But all in all, like to me, this year I thought, okay, this impacts Maiusi. In the future, does it impact Auburn's standing with Woodyard? Those were the 2 immediate names that popped in my head when I was kind of processing what this move could mean.
Yes, exactly. But it also makes me think that Auburn is more selling out to win a lot more games this year than maybe originally people thought. Year 2. I think there's this win now urgency thing that I know he's building what he wants to build, but there's if you get someone like this that you think can help you win immediately and you do it, it gives me a little bit of an insight on what the mindset is.
Yeah, sure. Which is what the fan base wants. Like they want to win now, as they should. And this coaching staff wants to win now too, which is obvious. So, all right, let's jump into our conversation with Trey. He hosts Locked On Terps, get the Maryland perspective of all of this. But before we do that, Darrell, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
Follow me on socials, X, Dap6410, Instagram, Darrell Dap, and then with you Wednesdays and Fridays.
Yes, and all next week as we will be live from Dallas at Radio Row for SEC Media Days. Crossover segment with Locked On Terps coming up. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. I love sports. I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs are well behind us and championships have been won, we've got MLB. And that's it. That's it. Which MLB's fun, especially when the Braves are playing well. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. Yes, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long, much like Locked On. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the Locked On Podcast Network. Joining us now here on the show, Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps. Trey, it's weird how many crossovers we've done. Usually Auburn and Maryland don't have a whole lot to do with each other. That's not been the case lately. Auburn has signed Fa'Najae Gotay, a very experienced linebacker. He's played a ton of football at Maryland. What are your thoughts on Gotay as a player and a potential addition for the Tigers?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of different thoughts. I think in terms of how the Auburn fans should look at it, number one thing I think he's going to bring is leadership. He's going into his 7th season playing college football, so he's been around a ton. He's gone through a bunch of different things. He's been injured. He's had some good years. He's had some decent years. So I think he can relate to a lot of different guys in the Auburn defense and just the Auburn team overall. So I think that's the number one thing that he'll kind of bring, and the kind of player that he is, just having that experience. He can bring a lot of different types of leadership quality that I think can benefit Auburn a lot. I know you guys have some young, really good players, some really talented players, and he's going to be able to put a lot of those guys in the right spots, give a lot of those guys good advice. So when I start with Fa'Najae Gotay, I thought he was a great leader for the Maryland team.
Yeah, sure. When I saw this signing and Auburn announced it on their social medias, I wasn't familiar with him. This kind of popped up out of nowhere, Trey, and I just assumed that this would be a guy with a few years left of eligibility. And it's like, okay, cool. He can be a special teams guy and a depth piece, and then possibly get a larger role down the line. That's not what this is. This is a guy who's out of eligibility after this year. But you say he's a leader. I don't know. I'm just a little surprised. I'm a little surprised that he would choose to go to Auburn, given Auburn's situation at linebacker. I just kind of wonder where the playing time is going to come from.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the question mark that was with Maryland a little bit. Like, he was definitely going to play and everything, but Maryland likes to rotate a lot of different guys in. So it was like he was never like quite the starter, but he would still play a ton of time. And it was kind of interesting in that type of way. And so I kind of looked at it the same way as Maryland. So I'm not really understanding why he kind of decided to go to Auburn. I don't really understand that 100%. I mean, maybe he just wants to play in the SEC and try and play in that type of environment. And it's really cool to play for Auburn football, but I don't know exactly why, because it doesn't seem like that much of a different situation than what he's going into than what he was at with Maryland. It might even be worse, to be honest. So I don't really know if maybe playing time wasn't his number one priority, but I feel like that would be. So I don't know exactly how the Auburn depth chart lines up at linebacker. Sounds like there's definitely some guys in that room, but I don't know exactly why he chose Auburn, to be honest.
Yeah. What was the mood or reaction from the Maryland fan base when Gotay said, "Hey, I'm entering the portal"?
It was interesting. A lot of different kind of opinions on it. Some people didn't get it because they're like, you've been here forever. It's your last year. Why enter the portal now after coming back for a 7th season? You were in line to play a good bit. Where else could kind of benefit you? This feels like the right program for you. And then other people, I said, I understood it. Sometimes when people have been around a long time, it's just time to get a different change in the building and see different things. And I also kind of understood it because in the Maryland spring game, one thing that came out that was really weird that I didn't understand was we went in our spring game, we went first team offense versus first team defense. And he was on playing against the second team offense and playing with the second team defense, which I didn't understand, which is another reason why I thought it was very possible that he entered the portal. That's a reason I brought up on Locked On Terps. But so that's kind of where I go with that. There was different opinions on it for sure. It definitely impacted our linebacker room because we already lost Jayshon Barham to Michigan, who was one of our most talented players, probably our most talented player. So losing another guy like Fa'Najae Gotay definitely didn't help us. But it's nothing. We have a couple young guys as well, and also some veterans in that room. So fans weren't freaking out about it, but it definitely was a loss for sure.
Sure. So, I mean, you and I may split hairs on which conference is the best, but I do think we would agree that the SEC and the Big Ten are the best two conferences in college football. Gotay as a linebacker in the Big Ten, I mean, did he hold his own? Was he average? Was he slightly above average? What kind of tier would you put him as, okay, this was Gotay's status in the Big Ten?
I'd say he's pretty much average. That's kind of exactly where I think he lines up. I think he's a great depth type of player, but he's not going to go around and be a star and make all these different plays all over the field. I don't think he's that type of player, but he's the type of guy that you have in for depth, and he's going to always do exactly what you need him to do. Like I said, he's going to be a leader. So he's not going to be some guy that goes off and is an NFL draft pick, I don't think, or anything like that. He's just a guy that's going to be a solid piece to your team. And he was very solid for Maryland. I never thought of him as that next level type of player, but he's also not a poor player by any means. I don't want anybody to think that he's not a good player. Like, he's a very average, I would say, Big Ten linebacker, which would probably lead to being about an average SEC type of linebacker, which I think it's not I think that's the level that he is. I think that's who he is as a player.
So we're recording this just 30 minutes after the announcement. So a lot of this info is still new, but I'm just looking at, he's been playing college football so long that it looks like Durkin actually recruited him because I mean, he was at Maryland from 2016, 2018, and Gotay played in the 2018 season. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a connection there too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That would make sense. That makes sense with the defensive coordinator,
which is wild that he's been playing college football that long. That's insane.
I know, because that feels like a while ago, that the Durkin thing at Maryland, that feels like pretty far removed now.
Yeah, no question about it. No question. So this is a guy who, I mean, I'm just looking at how he was used at Maryland, snap count wise at Pro Football Focus. Looks like they used him some an outside linebacker, but for the most part, he was an inside guy. Some of the highlights that he shared on socials and that I've seen, it's like him running down quarterbacks. Doesn't look like that happened a lot, but I mean, do you see him being used as like a pass rusher potentially, or is he truly a linebacker?
He definitely did play a little bit of outside linebacker, and sometimes we just line him up and just let him get after the quarterback. I think you can do it. I'm not in love with him out there. I think he can do it. I think that's one of his better spots coming from a linebacker as a blitzer. I think that's one of his best kind of traits, but lining him outside and just saying, go get the quarterback, I don't think he would be particularly great at it, but he did do it some at Maryland. But it was a lot of inside linebacker, just lining him up, blitzing him. He was good against the run. I never thought he was great against the pass. He had an interception last year, but I just never thought he was great against the pass. But he's solid overall. He'll get a couple plays in the backfield if you just line him up to blitz. He's definitely good at that. But I don't really see him playing that much outside linebacker. I don't think he would create a lot of chaos back there in terms of getting past SEC type of tackles.
Sure. Well, regardless, Fa'Najae Gotay seems like a great depth piece at worst in this situation for Auburn. Trey, thank you so much for your time. How could people check out all of the Maryland content here at Locked On?
Yeah, make sure you guys go over to Locked On Terps and make sure you guys go check it out. If you guys are any Maryland fans or just interested in Big Ten football, you can go and check out Locked On Terps.
Yeah. Like I said, weird kind of Auburn Maryland connection right now with Durkin, with Rico Walker, and now with Fa'Najae Gotay. So hey, please like the video, please subscribe, and we will see you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.